In today's episode of Backpacker Radio presented by The Trek, we are joined by Patricia Cameron. Patricia is a journalist, thru-hiker, and the founder and executive director at Blackpackers, a nonprofit whose mission is to eliminate economic disparities of people of color in outdoor recreation. We chat in depth about Patricia's Colorado Trail thru-hike last year, including what it was like to hike during a pandemic, how much she loved the hiker trash camaraderie, some of her favorite stops along the trail, and much more. We also learn about the origin of Blackpackers, some of the challenges and successes she's had in building it, and the impact she's seen with the Colorado POC community so far. We wrap the convo with some very important Breaking Bad chat and what it's like to pee yourself. The show closes with a triple crown of animals you don't want to see on trail. We ponder how badly we want to explore the universe. I opine why I think Ultra is probably losing ground with the thru-hiking community. And we get a taste for a new podcast project courtesy of our very own Ms. Juliana Chauncey. But first...
If you've listened to Backpacker Radio, you know that both Zach and I are big fans of Gossamer Gear, manufacturers of lightweight backpacking gear and accessories. Their packs carry comfortably, their roomy shelters protect in harsh weather conditions, and their trekking poles are some of the lightest on the planet. Gossamer Gear is changing the perception of delicate, ultralight gear. Zach and I are both users of Gossamer Gear's packs and shelters. I used Gossamer Gear's The One Shelter on the AT and PCT, which is both spacious and light, weighing less than 1.5 pounds. I've also used Gossamer Gear's The Two Shelter on the Colorado Trail, which has all the room for if you're hiking with a +1. Zach has used the Gorilla, their 40-liter pack, for more than 3,000 miles of backpacking and is a big proponent of the Gossamer Gear Light Flex hiking umbrella, which he used on the PCT and Trans-Catalina Trail. Good news, listeners of Backpacker Radio can score an exclusive deal on Gossamer Gear products. Use discount code POOPSTORY for 15% off your cart at gossamergear.com. Again, that's POOPSTORY, all one word, at gossamergear.com. Don't sleep on this as the deal is only valid for a limited time.
In case you're not already familiar, Greenbelly is the maker of one of the most complete nutrition bars on the market. Their meals contain 650 calories each, more than 2.5 times the energy of a Cliff Bar. Think of them like cereal bars on steroids. Because Greenbelly meals are ready to eat, requiring no stove or cleanup, they make the perfect midday trail meal. Their meals are super light and made with wholesome ingredients, with flavors like peanut apricot, dark chocolate banana, mango cashew coconut, cranberry almond, and their new flavor, spiced caramel apple, which is every bit as good as it sounds. They taste great and are handmade fresh every week. Chauncey and I both love the texture of these bars. They're dense but still soft. They're also not too sweet, which is a nice change of pace in the world of sugary meal replacement bars. The bars are great for long-distance treks, as the founder, Christopher Cage, is himself a thru-hiker. You may recognize that name from his appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience. And good news for you, our wonderful Backpacker Radio listeners, you get an exclusive 10% discount site-wide at Greenbelly. Just use code TREK2021 at checkout at their website, greenbelly.co. Again, the code is TREK2021, like the year, at greenbelly.co. Don't wait, this deal is only good for a limited time. Welcome to Backpacker Radio, presented by The Trek. I am your co-host, Zach Badger Davis, and sitting in the bottom right screen today is...
Hi, I'm Juliana Chauncey, a.k.a. Chaunce.
Question of the day, what are your spring/early summer hiking plans?
It's the time of year where everyone's doing hikes and leaving on things and talking about it, and so it's the time of year where I'm really trying to focus on not quitting my job. Yeah. So it's been a really hard struggle. I've had like several mini meltdowns about it, but the conclusion is, in fact, I cannot quit my job. I'm like doing pretty well. I'm like on a good track. Like there's no reason I would do that right now apart from FOMO and just like wanting to be outside. And me and Elliot were talking about it today, how it's just like you look out the window at 7 and the sun is still up. And it's like, I forgot that happens. And every year the sun does come back out. It stays out till like 9 p.m. But I just like forget that it's going to happen again. And I just think we're in darkness forever.
Yeah.
So something about this time of year just really, it makes me want to plan something. And I'm trying really hard not to, is my answer.
I would say my depression lessens by like 10 to 15% with daylight savings. Just having that extra hour of light into the evening. I don't have a good explanation for why it has such a profound effect for me. But when it gets dark early, man, I am kind of a bummer. I mean, I'm always a bummer, but I'm a little bit less of a bummer when it's light till 7:00. My answer to that question is, this is more so just an opportunity to say this, but because I got my first jab a week ago, things are actually starting to look up. I pretty much have just written off every possible avenue for myself because of the pandemic, but I got lucky. I signed up for like every single waiting list, and I got an email about they were opening it up to the public, and it literally went in like a 5-minute span. I actually texted Chance about it. She wasn't close enough to her phone. But
I thought I was being spammed. I really didn't know if I should respond. Like if I responded, I thought all my passwords would be taken.
I legitimately
That's how weird it was.
I was sending text messages like probably at the rate of 30 per minute. I was being as annoying as possible in a very friendly way, but in hindsight, it backfired. Yeah. So sorry about that.
Like, you know what I'm definitely not going to do is click that link because I know it's a virus.
Yeah. But this is one I've been eyeing for years, and just for whatever reason, well, lots of reasons it hasn't happened, is the Tahoe Rim Trail. Not necessarily within the seasonality that Elise has outlined for us, but I don't have a lot of free time nowadays, so that's kind of all that I've got on the bucket list for this year.
When are you going to do that?
I don't know. All I have is the idea right now. I haven't gotten it past that at all.
Okay, you got time.
I haven't even looked to see like what the snow situation is in the Sierra, so that would dictate a lot of it. But that's where I am in my life, basically. Okay, I don't want to waste any more time. I'm super excited for today's interview. If you follow the Trek on Instagram, perhaps you've gotten a sneak peek for what today's interview has in store for us. But if you don't, or you didn't see that IG Live, I'm super excited to welcome today's guest, Patricia Cameron of Colorado Blackpackers. Patricia, thank you so much for rejoining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay, so I mentioned this before we hit record, but there probably will be some overlap with the Instagram Live that we did. I think we're going to reach a lot more people and a lot of new people through this, so I don't want to leave any juicy topics off the table for today. But let's just start kind of with your background, specifically, like how did you get into the outdoors / backpacking?
Yeah, it's it's not like, I guess I call it like my superhero villain story, kind of, in a sense. I didn't start going outdoors seriously until about 2017. I had been divorced for a little bit, and my ex-husband was born and raised here. And he kind of got me into the outdoors just a little bit, but not a whole bunch. And then when I got divorced, I was like super worried about being a single mother and my son not getting the same experience that everybody who's born and raised in Colorado Springs has, which is like they just know the outdoors. Like it's a different, like they can translate that language really well. So I started Googling how to like backpack. And I took what I learned from Google, which was a whole bunch. And I bought a whole bunch of used gear. I bought this old, it was like a North Face bullfrog tent, I think it was. And like a used, I think an old REI rental backpack. And I actually went to REI and asked them to help me set up the tent because I didn't even know how to set up the tent. And then I went camping in a snowstorm at 11 Mile State Park into their backcountry. It was like, I think April that year, because that's how Colorado does. We just snow a whole bunch in March and April. And I survived. That was awesome. And I kind of got addicted to it ever since then. So then, I Googled how to fish. I learned how to fish. I taught my son how to fish. And since then, I've been kind of just building on that and going out as much as I could.
the green vested guru have any hesitancy for showing you how to set up the tent? And I ask that because we once rented ice axes and crampons, and the representative refused to show us how for a liability reason. I imagine obviously an ice axe is very different than a tent in terms of risk profile, but I'm just curious, like if there was any hesitancy.
No, it was two young ladies at RAI. The only one in Colorado Springs was North Academy. It was amazing. I think they were mostly concerned with me surviving as well, because everybody knew a snowstorm was coming up. So maybe they figured if they didn't help me put that tent together, I would not make it out of the snowstorm. But I was kind of committed to that weekend because I only don't have my son every other weekend in the month. So there's only like about 4 days of a month when I don't have my son. And so like when I pick a day, I have to go with that day. And so, yeah, it was snowing, but I kind of had to go. So.
I get that. And I'm sorry, did you say, are you originally from the Springs?
No, I was born and raised outside of Washington, D.C. in Prince George's County, Maryland.
Gotcha.
But I've been here since like 1994.
Okay, cool. And I guess kind of a parlay on the previous question, when did writing about your experiences enter into the equation? Did you set out on, and we'll talk about this in a lot of depth upcoming, your Colorado Trail through hike, knowing that you wanted to journal about it? And were you writing previously to that?
I had written previously to that, but I totally knew that I was going to write about it, or at least I wanted to. And so in January of last year, I went to OR like I always did. And I think I had COVID during that OR. In hindsight, I got pretty sick. I missed the third day of OR because I was like in a Denver hostel puking my brains out, or it couldn't walk. Anyway, long story short, I was at OR last January and I knew I wanted to do the Colorado Trail. And this is before we knew COVID was here and it hit us, that kind of thing. And so before I got sick in the hostel, I was walking around like the floor of OR, just trying to get people interested in maybe the project for the Colorado Trail. And hopefully get somebody interested in the experience and get some people to help me out beforehand. The cool thing is Adam Roy, a backpacker, I kind of knew him prior from Twitter, things like that. But I wrote before I left an article about the George Floyd protests. And I think it was called Words Aren't Enough this time, because everybody in the outdoor industry was putting out those black squares on Instagram and Facebook and pretty much doing nothing else. And so I teamed up with Adam from Backpacker with that. And then because of that, we had a little bit of a relationship. I pitched the idea and he was totally down. So I always wanted to write about it, specifically because I really wanted to show, like if my point was to talk about diversity on the trail and show diversity on the trail, I kind of had to show diversity on the trail. So I tweeted about it a whole bunch. I Facebooked about it a whole bunch. And I wrote about it like weekly for Backpackers.
And so you mentioned that you were a regular of Outdoor Retailer. Were you there on behalf of Colorado Blackpackers?
At that time I was. The years I went previously, I went as a member of the media. Like for 1 year, I went like on an assignment for the Denver Post and wrote about some stuff there. So yeah, for various reasons, I've been to OR. And that's kind of one of the reasons why Blackpackers came to be, because I just saw how white it is. I mean, I guess there's no gentle way to say that. It's just super white at OR. And you see like the same 20 people of color each year. Like we hang out, do karaoke, that kind of thing. But I just kind of wanted to, change the representation of that floor. And I knew it would take a little bit of work in terms of like the back end of it. So that's part of what Blackpacker's mission is to help get people in the outdoor industry.
Not only is it uncomfortably white, but there's also like only maybe 6 or 7 templates of person at the show. And I realize, like, sadly, I am one of them. There's the guy with the baseball cap and the flannel, typically a beard. And like, I just fit into that mix too perfectly. And it's really annoying to me. It makes me want to change my look. So you mentioned
that's
that
Denver and that's Colorado. Like there's only like 7 templates and that kind of fits that. So yeah.
That's a really good point. You go to any brewery and you're going to see like clones of me essentially. But you mentioned that you were there in behalf of the Denver Post. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about your journalism background. I guess this is something that we didn't touch on previously. When did you get into journalism?
I didn't go to J school or anything. I went to school for philosophy, and it's done me a whole bunch of good. But I didn't have any background like in education with it. I did work for like a college newspaper at UCCS, the University of Colorado Springs, and they call it the Scribe for a little bit. I originally wanted to go into sports journalism. I swore I was going to be like the first woman on Monday Night Football. That was like my dream. That didn't happen. But I started writing a little bit later on, and gosh, I would say the first thing I published in my adult years probably came around 2016 or 17 or 18, I think. Maybe actually it was with the Colorado Sun. And I wrote about equity issues in Colorado Springs. I wrote about the transit system here. So I think I started with like equity and justice things. And then I started writing more about the outdoors as I got into it. So I guess I've only been writing professionally for like 3 years or so.
So would I be correct in assuming that you are a football fan?
Yes, I'm not a Bronco fan anymore, though. So there's that. I just don't care anymore.
Redskins? Yeah. Okay. So you've abandoned the Bronco
a Washington football team. Yeah, I used to be a Washington football team fan because I grew up there. And my family, of course, like that's what they do. And I've always hated like the Ravens because I have to. Like in my specific area of Maryland where I come from, like Baltimore and PG County have this like gentle rivalry going on. So I have to dislike the Ravens. And so because of that, I kind of like the Washington football team. But I'm super not a fan of the Broncos. I'm also super not a fan of Elway, which isn't very popular in Colorado. So,
Any particular reason? I don't follow the Elway news too closely, other than the fact that he's got like every car dealership in the state.
Man, his personality is pretty awful. I feel like I don't know if I don't even. Yeah, I'm not even sure like how to express that. I'm just like a fan of Elway. I think one time I saw him, I went to a Rascal Flatts concert. And I saw him like dancing on stage with like this blonde woman, I guess. I don't know. I'm just not like an Elway person. It's really hard to explain. But I think part of that stems back to I like Terrell Davis a lot more. And I think Terrell Davis won the Super Bowls more than Elway did. That's my thing.
Terrell Davis was the only authentic football jersey that I've ever owned. I also very much like Terrell Davis. Didn't hurt that we shared the same last name. But yeah, he was the man, 2,000 yards. Okay, let's talk about... Actually, so I think I was under the assumption that let me correct myself. That's not true. So Black Packers, where did that happen in the chronology of the story with the Colorado Trail? Was this, how many years did this predate the CT?
It didn't really. I started Black Packers essentially like a club maybe in 2017, I think. And then I formed an LLC in 2019. And then some really awesome people who are now on my board of directors reached out to me on Twitter and asked if I needed any help with the business. I mentioned I wanted to become a nonprofit. And so we filed the 1023 in December of 2019. And so I didn't actually officially get a nonprofit status until February of 2020, so last year. So it's been essentially just a year now that we've been officially a nonprofit.
Can you just explain for anyone who isn't knowledgeable of it, what is Black Packers? Like, what is everything that's involved with it?
Yeah. So Black Packers is kind of a lot of it in the name. It's basically a 501c3 nonprofit aimed to get people outdoors who may otherwise have access issues with that. And so our tagline is economic equity and outdoor recreation. I like to say that we meet people at the intersection of underrepresentation and economic vulnerability. There's a stat that I like to bring up when talking about this and why I talk about the money part of the outdoor industry. Since the civil rights movement, the median wealth of a Black family has gone down by 75%, and for a white family, it's gone up by 14%. And so a lot of times we talk about, diversity and inclusion and getting people outdoors, and I feel like we've kind of missed the undercurrent of the economic problems. And I think it applies to like a lot of industries, especially in America, where there's like so much of the haves and have-nots. But when we talk about, the people who meet at the intersection of like wealth issues or like maybe having economic issues that would prevent them from getting outdoors and affording it, that intersection tends to lie a lot with the Black community and other communities of color and affinity groups. I just mentioned the Black community because that's the one I'm a part of. And so that's what we work on. We basically take people out on things and pay for it. We just took 27 people of color to Arapahoe Basin. We paid for their skis or snowboards, their gear, their apparel, their lift ticket, and a half-day lesson. We've taken people fly fishing. We do backpacking. We do camping. We took like 32 people to 11 Mile State Park and took care of all their gear. They did hiking then as well. They learned some leave no trace stuff. We actually are just about to start a aquatics program where we're going to teach families how to swim in concert with our like water sports program that'll probably happen sometime in summer. So that's basically what Blackpackers does. That and we have a gear locker so people can rent gear from us. And as long as you've been on that particular activity, you can rent that gear. So if you've been camping with us before, you can rent camping gear. And then lastly, we try to provide like a pipeline into employment in the outdoor industry by getting people internships or volunteer opportunities with us or other places in the industry so that maybe OR isn't so uncomfortably white anymore.
Yes, that would be awesome. So I know you're based in the Springs. Blackpackers is also headquartered in the Springs. I'm curious, what regions of Colorado does Blackpackers work with? Like if I'm in Grand Junction, is there anything available for me?
So Blackpackers is based in Colorado Springs, and that's where I live. We do activities all over the state. We have board members up and down the Front Range from about north is all the way to Fort Collins and down to Colorado Springs. Grand Junction is a little tough for me because I am the only employee for Blackpacker. So it essentially depends on if I can get out the Grand Junction. Not saying it's not a possibility, but basically the events are just scheduled based upon, my availability, but also I think the need. And so I've seen the most need thus far up and down the Front Range.
That makes sense. And can you talk about kind of the evolution? I know this is new. You said it started kind of with your CT hike last year, but can you talk about, even in that short time, the evolution of Colorado Blackpackers? Because I feel like you've had a nice spike in popularity and notoriety, just the growth that you've seen over the course of the last year.
This last year has been great. I'm sorry, I missed part of that question. You were just asking about what happened over the last year?
Yeah, I think my internet might be terrible right now. I apologize, guys. But yeah, just I guess if you could speak to the growth of Blackpackers over the last year, because you said it started with your CT hike. So I just am very impressed with how well you've been able to grow it just in a short amount of time.
Yeah. So, I mean, Blackpackers didn't really start with the CT hike. I'd say the attention on Blackpackers started with the CT hike. Our first event was in August of 2019. And then the day after Outdoor Retailer, the day after I didn't know I could have possibly had a contagious disease, a super contagious disease. On February 1st, we went to Camp Shady Brook and Deckers and took 47 Black and Indigenous people on this kind of a trip of this YMCA camp. So everybody had each family had their own cabins, and we paid for everything there too. And they had yoga, stuff like that. So we had been doing events before the CT, but what I really wanted to do with the CT was just kind of bring attention to the diversity issue that I have been talking about. It's just interesting being in Colorado because Colorado has become the hub of the outdoors with VF Corp here and OR here and everybody driving Subarus, whatever. So it's become I think one of the standards for outdoor recreation and just how that lifestyle is. And I notice it more here because of that, just how the disparities are. So I guess I picked the Colorado Trail to kind of hopefully get what I wanted, which was attention on the idea or the fact that it's harder for some people to go outdoors. And in a state like Colorado where everybody's going outdoors, I think it's a shame. So.
Mm-hmm. And I know you wrote a post for Backpacker about once you're a thru hiker, you're always a thru hiker, kind of talking about the thru hiking bug. I'm curious. I know the organization is still relatively nascent, but have you seen that impact with people that have come through Blackpackers in terms of taking them out on an adventure and them really resonating with that and sparking more curiosity for outdoor adventures?
It's been super awesome seeing the people that have come out with me. I took 3 women of color with me on the Colorado Trail at different parts. So the first week I took a lady with me, and the last week I took 2 women with me, and they stayed for 3 days and 3 days and 2 nights. And I still follow the Instagram posts of one of the ladies that I took out on the Colorado Trail the last week, and she's going out hiking still. She's talking so much about how much she loved it. We even gave her a trail name in the time she was out there, and how much she identified with the trail name and how much it meant to her. It's the outdoors sticks with you if you can get into it, which is why it's so important to get everybody out there. And I know for me, I am still on the trail in my mind. I just haven't left in so many different ways. I'm still stuck out there. And so I'm always feeling how can I get back out there? And so it's been the case with the participants for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, your passion for the trail is palatable, and I know you've got some really good stories. So I want to jump right into it. Um, Yes, let's talk about the Colorado Trail. I know, obviously, so you did this last year. This was during a pandemic year when
Yeah.
there was a lot of uncertainty circulating, really doing anything. So I'm curious, this is your first long distance backpacking trip, and then that's happening in the middle of a pandemic. Can you kind of just talk through where your head's at as you're preparing and starting the trail?
Yeah, it was. So like I said, I thought about wanting to do the Colorado Trail even before, we knew anything was happening. I went to OR with the intent of getting like sponsors and people that may be interested in it. And then, the panic hits, right? And we don't know what's going to happen. Everybody's like super uncertain for their plans in general. I think the AT, I'm not sure if they closed down, but people abandoned those plans. The PCT wasn't having people, hike on it. And so there were so many different things going on with the outdoors community. The one thing I always liked about the CT is that it's still in Colorado, and I could still be close enough that if I needed to get back to my son, I could get back to him. So I think the benefit I had to hiking the CT as opposed to the other longer distance hikes is that I had a larger window of error in which to make the decision to go, because I didn't leave until July 6th, I think it was. And so that gave me a lot more time than people who are hiking the longer trails to pick. And so it wasn't until I think like May, when the curve started flattening a bit and things kind of started getting a little bit less restrictive, is when I finally committed that I'm going to do it. So it was kind of like a madhouse over here, because I had to try to get sponsors, try to get gear, because I didn't have any of that prior to it, arranged to start writing about it. And so all that happened between like May and June. Prior to that, I kind of just sat in the house like and couldn't think of what I was going to do with the summer.
Did you, did you choose to hike the Colorado Trail based on the pandemic and what was going on with that? Like, if there wasn't COVID and all of that going on, would you have chosen a different trail?
I probably wouldn't have. I have a 14-year-old son that I'm the primary caretaker for. And so I can't imagine spending the months away from him that I would need to do those. I tell him, though, as soon as he turns 18, mama's on the PCT. So yeah.
That's a graduation present to himself, right? Home alone home alone for a summer.
For a few months. Just a few months.
What did your son make of your hike while you were out there? I imagine that you were in regular communication. Was he missing you? Was he proud of you? Can you talk about the range of emotions that he had?
Me and my son are super close. I've been a single mother for most of his life. He's had some like physical illnesses that has spent some time in the hospital. So me and him are just like super duper close. And so, yeah, he missed me a lot. I had a Garmin InReach Explorer, so the one with the screen. And so I texted him pretty much every day if I needed to. There's those canned messages. And one of them is, I'm stopping here. And so every night I would text him, I'm stopping here, so he could see where I was because the location's on there. And he's a 14-year-old boy, so like he's playing video games, but also like, interested in what mom's doing. I'm not sure if he had like the full grasp of me walking 486 miles. Like one day he sent me a text and they just said WYD. And I was like, I am hiking. Like, what do you mean? What am I doing? Like, I'll be hiking every day for 7 weeks. So I'm like, what are you talking about? So I'm not sure if he had like the whole gravity of like the things I was going through. But the cool thing was at the end of the trip, every night I would send him the I'm stopping here so he can see my location. At the end of the trip, my vice president was bringing him to Durango to pick me up. And I got there before they did. And I sent I'm stopping here from the end of the trail at the southern terminus. And he saw that. He could see I was in Durango. And so he sent me a text back like, you did it. You made it. It was amazing. Like I cried.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I imagine that reunion for both of you was probably a pretty spectacular moment.
It was awesome. And I had a chance to shower before I saw him again. So I kind of looked human when he saw me. So it was so good to see him again. It was so awesome.
I feel like that's a necessary punishment for a kid, especially a teenage kid, that they have to smell a thru hiker at the end of a thru hike. Like that's
right, because I smelled him. Like I'm not trying to put anything out there, but he's a teenager, so I'm just like, you deserve a little bit. I get it too, so you deserve it.
Yeah. No, I was the worst smelling. So, okay. So spoiler alert, you finished. This isn't wild. But yeah, let's talk about some of the highlights, lowlights. I want to go deep on the hike. So when you started July 8th, you said?
July 6th.
July 6th, sorry. When I think of July in Colorado, I just think of monsoon season. How much lightning did you have to deal with on your hike?
I barely dealt with any. There were only a couple times. Like I dealt like monsoon season. I'm not sure how accurate that is as far as July 6th, but I didn't deal with a lot of lightning. I only got caught in lightning twice. That was once on Cyril Pass. That was heading into Leadville, coming out of Breck, and I actually like pulled back and camped that night. And funny enough, Taylor Swift had just dropped an album that night, and I had cell service, and so I was able to download Taylor Swift's new album, which I was stoked about. I'm a big Taylor Swift fan. But that was the one time I pulled back from lightning. Right. I love her. And so I pulled back there, and then I got caught on Indian Trail Ridge towards the end of the trail, but I was actually literally in lightning. And I was stuck up there in hail, wind, lightning, on like this like trail that's probably maybe 2 foot wide and like a precipice on either side. And I was really like bitter about it because it was the end of the trip. And in my head, I kept thinking it should get easier towards the end, but no. I almost died at the very end, which would have been interesting. But those are the only 2 times I caught lightning. Most of the time it was just super hot.
When it was like around you and you were in it, what were you doing? Like, were you trying to get off the ridge? Were you hunkering down? What was going on?
I was crying, literally crying. So I love this story because like I had been hiking with these 2 hikers for a few days. It was one of the first times I had the opportunity to hike with anybody for multiple days because I was always really slow. And even towards the end, I stayed slow because everybody had sped up like I had at that point. So I was always behind people. But towards the end, I was been able to put those 20-mile days underneath. I was able to hang out with some hikers. But I knew on this particular stretch, since it was such a large incline, I was going to lose them because I slow down tremendously on inclines. I'm not going to lie. Like it's 1 mile per hour, barely. And so I'm hiking up this incline and I look at, I think it was the data book, and it mentions bailout point for Indian Trail Ridge. It was like last bailout point for like multiple miles. And I don't know why it didn't occur to me that bailout meant I'd be committed to this ridge, but I didn't even think about it. So as I got closer, I'm like right at tree line, the storm started moving in. And I come down to these shrubs that were barely taller than me. And I'm trying to find safety. And I was waiting for the storm to pass because like you're talking about, Zach, they go pretty quickly in Colorado. Like they don't generally stay around that long. But this one stayed there. And so I'm just like, I'm too close to the end. I don't want to spend not one more night on this trail. I wanted to get done with this. But I was super scared about getting caught in the storm. And so these 3 like younger kids start walking up the trail and they're like super stoked and like singing and all happy. And I come out of the shrubs and I yell at them like, are you going to continue on in the storm? And they yell back, yeah. And so I yelled to them, I'm scared. And like, I don't even remember, like, I didn't even think to say that. Like it just, I don't know, it just came out of me. I'm scared. And so one of the kids, like this little white dude, it was so great. He walked to me and he was just like, hey, you got a couple options here. You can stay here, try to pitch your tent here. And this is a pretty rad spot. Or you can come with us and we'll stay with you. And so it was so cool. They let me stay in the front of them, which was awesome because I'm slow and I know they were faster than me, but they were okay with my speed. And we just petered across that ridge. I cried. I was so scared, but they stayed behind me. And there was a young lady behind me who kept talking to me and just asking me questions. She was like, what's your son's name? What do you think he's doing right now? Trying to keep my mind off it. And the dude who I talked to at the beginning who said that my spot was red was like singing like God Bless America or something, or just like loving the storm and like loving the fact that we could just roll off this mountain and die or get struck by lightning. But we made it over. It took a couple miles and we camped at like Taylor Lake is what it's called. But yeah, that's all I did. The answer to that is I cried a lot.
The guy singing in the lightning storm, I'm picturing Lieutenant Dan. Did he have a trail name, and was it Lieutenant Dan?
I remember that trail name. I think I was just so focused on just like staying alive. I've never been that close to lightning in my life.
Fair.
And then like it was just like a storm. And then when the hail hit, I was just like, what else could you add? Like what else could happen here to make this worse?
Yeah.
That's like you get big hail there too.
Yeah, we can get some pretty big hail. The hail wasn't that big, but it was just a lot of it. And so on top of that, like I was worried about like losing my footing or something like that because of the hail as we're getting pelted by it. So it was interesting.
I remember there were times where we were like above tree line and it would start hailing and it was just like trying to set up the tent while also getting just like beaten up by them hitting you. And it's just like, ow, 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 like while setting it up.
It's awful. It's super painful. Yeah.
The Colorado Trail. Yeah.
So you mentioned your newfound hiking partners kind of saving your day in that stressful moment. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about the hiker camaraderie and like what your expectations were for that element going into the hike?
I didn't have any expectations about it. I did the thing. I watched the movie Wild. I read the book, and I was in all the trail groups, talking to people. And I know everyone told me that you'll meet people out there, and the people you meet out there is one of the best parts. But as somebody had only hiked, I think the longest backpacking trip I had taken before this was like 3 days. I'd never had an opportunity to, really meet people out there. It's life changing. I've told people since then that probably, other than having my son, which of course is the most life changing thing in my life right now, this has redefined who I am and my expectations of the world. And I think my expectations of like my own power, but also like the power of like what community can really do. And it's given me so much more faith in what we can accomplish and even what Blackpackers as a group can accomplish for equity in outdoors. But people on the trail are amazing. Like everyone is your family. Everyone's looking out for you. You know everybody, even if you haven't met them yet, because the trail names travel up and down the trail. You see each other in town. You can recognize each other immediately because you're wearing like really grimy clothes while you're trying to wash the other stuff, and you just look like haggard. I guess is the best way. You just look like you've been through it for 7 days. Staying at the hostels, going out to eat and having big steaks and beers with everybody. I don't know. I can't wait to do it again. Basically.
Yeah.
How many people were you seeing? Because so I section hiked the Colorado Trail in 2018. And so just having done it on weekends, I never really I would pass one or two people a day, but never really stayed by them. But I also feel like last year, because so many people had to cancel bigger trails, there were so many more people choosing things like the Colorado Trail. And the way you talk about it makes it sound kind of like the AT almost.
I experienced it as one long party. It was one moving caravan of a backpacker party. They said that, I think the Colorado Trail Foundation said that this was like the most completers they've had ever on the trail. So I can see that. But there was never a day where I didn't run across a few people, people to stop and talk with. There was a ton of people out there for sure. A lot of times I could even find people to camp with. If I, camped in a spot that was a pretty popular, like in the guidebook or in the data book, that kind of thing. But yeah, it wasn't empty at all. I was always running into people or cows. There are a lot of cows out there.
Okay. Speaking of finding people to camp with, in one of your backpacker posts, you talked, I think you were saying that you were going to hike past the spot and then someone poked their head out and just said the magical word whiskey. And then you ended up spending the night with them. Can you speak to that experience?
That was a great night. Those ladies do a trip on the Colorado Trail and do a section every year, apparently. And so I can't remember how many of them there were. Like I want to say it was probably like 9 or 10, maybe 9 to 11.
Oh wow!
And I was hiking. Yeah, I was hiking out of. I had just spent the night 2 nights prior at Mount Princeton. So I stayed the night at the hot springs, and then I spent the night at the Chalk Creek Trailhead, if I have that correct. And so I was supposed to meet another gentleman that I knew prior to the trail, actually, who lived in Colorado Springs. And so he was waiting for me a little bit further down the trail, but I was super tired that day. So I was kind of like dragging as I was getting closer and closer to where I was supposed to meet with him. And these ladies were all just like having this kind of big trail party, hanging out, pitching their tents and getting ready. And I saw them earlier in that day. I had just walked past them through cow country. It was really interesting because I had actually just puked like 10 minutes before I met them. I got some like canned chicken from a hiker box in Mount Princeton. I don't think it set well in my stomach. So I sat down.
That just sounds like something that's going to make you puke.
I thought it was going to be great. Like, I was like, I'm going to put this canned chicken on this tortilla. Like, it's going to be great. And it came right back up. So I was sitting there, like, dealing with the fact that I had just vomited. And then all these ladies just walked past me. So I wasn't, like, super friendly when I saw them the first time because I had just dealt with that. But the second time, they were like, hey, good to see you again. You want to take a break? We have whiskey. And that was it. I just pulled over and hung out with them the rest of the night. And they were amazing. I'm actually going to hike with them this summer when they do a section of the CT.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, and I think in that article you mentioned that group of friends has like very disparate skill sets when it comes to backpacking, but like they still do it together every year. It sounds like a really nice ritual.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So obviously you've got great things to say about the hiking community itself. Did you feel the same sort of reception from the towns that you visited along the Colorado Trail?
Yeah, for sure. The smaller towns in Colorado as you get to the south and the west can be interesting politically. But one thing I think was the case last year is that so many of those towns depend on tourism and depend on having visitors. And in general, they're really hospitable to visitors because of that. And also, specifically because of COVID, I think that Colorado was hurting for the tourism in that industry. And so I really didn't have any problem at all with any of the smaller towns. They were all super into like mask adherence, keeping things clean, super stoked to see us. They were always super kind to thru hikers. I met some of the nicest people. There's one place I stayed at, the Fireside Inn in Breckenridge. It's a bed and breakfast. And I've been going back there like 3 times since then during backpacker trips, just because people were just so kind to us as thru hikers.
Awesome. I know you had, I'm trying to like scrape my memory from our previous chat, but I know that you had some pretty fun, town stays aside from Breckenridge as well. I think one of them, you had a good time in Salida. Is that
Pizza.
memory?
Yeah, Salida. I had a good time in every town. I don't know how to better explain the fact that as soon as I got into town, it was steak and beer for me immediately. Like I went to find that as soon as I could. Salida was great. Salida was great because it's like one of the bigger towns left as you go southwest on the trip. So it's gosh, it reminds me of like Manitou Springs. It's just, I don't know, it's a bigger city. So it didn't feel like a town like in Lake City or Silverton did. I stayed at a hostel there and met some people. We went out and had pizza, had ice cream that night, drank a little bit. The same thing in Lake City. I met some people, some thru hikers. We actually shared some of our lodging, drank a little bit. Then I got to Silverton, which I think is probably my favorite hangout story, actually. Silverton's such a quaint little cute little town, and there's not like a whole bunch of else going on in Silverton at that time of year, but I caught a ride with some Texans who were on ATVs as they were coming down, because apparently Texans like to come do ATVs in Colorado. Like they were everywhere on the trail and they were super nice. They were willing to give us a ride, so I rode down with the Texans on the ATV, and then I spent the night in this like amazing hostel. They had like kind of like the owner, me and the owner hung out, and like he literally has like a Game of Thrones like dungeon downstairs, but it's actually a film room where he showed films. It was interesting because like there was rocks all over the wall, but he was really kind, and like I hung out with him for a little bit, and then me and a whole bunch of the thru hikers went out and had pizza and beer, and then we met this couple that were building a house out in Silverton. So the house wasn't even finished yet. And they were like, come on over, we can hang out some more. So we go to their house. It's just like essentially like a frame. And we hung out with this young couple, all of us. Bill was there, this magician I met on the trail, Brandon, he's amazing. Bill had hiked the AT in like 77, so they called him 77. And we just hung out and drank again into the night. But yeah, the trail towns are great.
Okay, you get one choice. You're going into town. What's your go-to meal and your go-to accompanying beverage?
I always had steak. I always had a medium rare steak. I don't know what it was, but I was craving a steak on the trail. And all I could think about on the times where I didn't want to be on the trail anymore, because there were plenty of days where I was just like, I am okay with going home now. Like this is over. But I kept thinking like, if you're going to quit at the next town. But then I get to the next town and there'd be a great steak. And I've gotten into IPAs recently. And so some sort of IPA. So it'd be a steak and an IPA every single time, even a couple nights. Like I did Neros and then Zeros, and I had steak both nights.
It's not a bad combination. Go ahead, Johns.
I was just going to say, I think it's a good trail for if you are starting to become into IPAs, because there's a lot of breweries in all the different towns. It's perfect.
Yeah. And I feel like Colorado loves a good IPA.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's what we do.
Was there one standout meal or restaurant for you along the trail?
Standout. I think when I ate at Mount Princeton Hot Springs, they're pretty classy, classier than I think I am on most days. So I rolled into Mount Princeton, and I actually had to get an article out to Backpacker. And that was always interesting because I only had a Nero and a Zero to get those articles out. And so I tried to push them through as fast as I could. but I wasn't able to stay there for the edits. So it was always interesting for that. So I sat in their dining area in Mount Princeton and had this huge burger. And then, of course, later on for dinner, I had steak, but I had a burger first. And it was just like super classy. There was all the white linens on the tablecloth, and then you can go out to the hot springs and have drinks poolside. So I think probably my favorite meal was at Mount Princeton, just because of like the ambient environment. And then I had like my Bluetooth keyboard on the table because I carried a Bluetooth keyboard in my side pocket of my backpack, and I would Bluetooth that to my phone and then do my typing.
Interesting. So were you writing every night, like taking notes?
Never. I was too tired. No, like every night I would just go to sleep. I would get in and eat. Sometimes I would eat. Like in the beginning, I actually didn't have that hiker hunger everybody talks about. I barely ate in the beginning. Towards the end, I was definitely eating everything, but sometimes I was just too tired. And I also tried to pitch my tent before it got too dark, because in the beginning, I kind of struggled with being out in the wilderness by myself. And if I went to sleep when the sun was kind of still out, I felt a little bit safer, I guess, in a sense. So, no, I didn't write at all, mostly on the trail. I would just hike and sleep mostly and talk to people, of course. But no writing.
So as someone that also likes to drink, I do too. I've got a margarita right here. Do you have, would you bring whiskey or anything like that on the trail? Because I find like if I'm having any trail anxiety, this was especially an issue for me when I first started, like a couple swigs of whiskey would just eliminate that. Now I could go right to sleep.
Yeah, interesting enough, I have an IPA right here since you were talking about you have a margarita next to you. Yeah, so the thing about the trail is interesting. I don't know any other trails, and I've lived in Colorado for a long time, but Colorado, marijuana is legal. And so a lot of that happened on the trail. It's not my jam. I can't hike and do that at the same time. So it, like you said, drinking probably was what helped me with the nerves occasionally. So when I left the town, I had a flask and I'd fill up that flask with something, but that only makes it like a day or two. And then you're back to not having anything to drink. So I would take a little flask, and the first couple of days I'd have a little something, but outside of that, like, it's Colorado. So people were having a good time with Colorado things. That's why I call it Colorado things.
Colorado things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sean, sorry, I feel like I'm dominating all the questions. So
that's okay. I mean, the good thing about bringing alcohol on the Colorado Trail is you got the altitude on your side. You're at 13,000 feet. One shot becomes two.
I'm so glad you said that. When I just went to Arizona for that Knowles course, I stopped at this place called Borderlands for a drink before I came back to Colorado. And I had 2 IPAs in Arizona and didn't even feel it. And you could not have 2 IPAs in Colorado and not feel it. I was disappointed. It's going to be expensive to drink at sea level.
Yeah.
When I go home to New York, I'm just like, I have such a strong liver. Like, no, I am not feeling tipsy at all. And it's just like so different here. You come back and you're like, I can actually only finish half of this beer right now, or I can't walk.
Yep. I'm stronger at sea level. Like, I feel like Superwoman, but I can't drink.
Yeah.
I can drink as much as I want to, but I'm faster down there. So
yeah. When my Flatlander friends come to visit me out here, like, I always have to remind them, like, drink as much water as you can, because you're going to feel terrible tomorrow. The hangover is 10 times worse if you're not acclimated to this.
Yep.
Taking a quick break to bring you a word from today's sponsor, Real Paper. Yes, we have a toilet paper sponsor. Life is starting to make sense. And we are super excited to shine a spotlight on Real, as they offer an environmentally conscious alternative to traditional toilet paper. Real is entirely tree-free, as it's made from 100% bamboo. The packaging uses 0 plastic. Even the packaging tape is made from paper. Let's talk about convenience, as Real is really that. You can get Real Paper delivered directly to your doorstep with subscription delivery options of every 12 weeks, 8 weeks, or if you're really attacking the ramen bombs, every 4 weeks. And nothing's more convenient than $0, which is how much shipping will cost you. And shopping at Real Paper helps to fund access to clean toilets for those in need. A portion of your purchase goes to Soil, a nonprofit R&D organization working in Haiti to improve their sanitation crisis. Here's where we save you some money. Head to realpaper.com, that's real, R-E-E-L, like a film reel, and use coupon code BACKPACKER at checkout to get 25% off your first order. Again, the code is BACKPACKER at realpaper.com for 25% off. Code BACKPACKER, site realpaper.com, 25% off. This offer is only good for a limited time.
Hi everyone! Today we want to talk to you about MyMedic. MyMedic began after a tragic automobile accident where the lack of equipment and training led to a family member bleeding out while waiting for emergency medical services. MyMedic's goal is to prepare everyone with equipment and training for the unexpected emergency. The MyMedic Solo Advanced Kit contains pro-level gear to treat everything from boo-boos to life-threatening injuries. It's small, water-resistant, and lightweight, making it perfect for hikers, backpackers, and outdoor enthusiasts. Visit mymedic.com to see more awesome products and use the code BACKPACKER25 at checkout for 25% off your first order. Again, that's BACKPACKER25 at mymedic.com.
Back to the show. So you mentioned the keyboard on the side of your pack. Let's talk about gear a little bit, if you don't mind. So you mentioned when you first got into backpacking, you had, I think you mentioned like a heavy North Face tent, and you rented a pack from REI. I'm curious the evolution from that to the Colorado Trail.
I've become one of those like aggravating ultralighters now. I've become that person that's constantly telling people to why are you carrying that? You don't need that. Like I'm always
are you sawing your toothbrush in half?
Out. Oh, I didn't like. That's funny. So I'm not that close, but I don't like to bring much, and my gear has gotten a lot lighter. On the trail, I carried they were a great sponsor with Six Moon Designs. I carried a Six Moon Designs Fusion 50. For my pack. And then I had a Lunar Solo. So it's a single wall tent that's pitched with your trekking poles for my tent. To be honest, I think in the future, I might even try to go like lighter than that as I develop into those things. But that's a lot lighter than that bullfrog I carried. I think it was like 6 pounds, that tent I carried in that snowstorm. I felt every pound of it. But yeah, I I don't like to bring a lot of things whatsoever. So that was really funny on my Knowles course, because my classmates were bringing things like, I don't know, like comfort items, like chairs and things like that. And I'm just not really into that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that was just not my jam. So in the Knowles course, I actually had the lowest base weight out of everybody because I only bring like one pair of clothes. People bring like multiple pair of underwear. And I'm like, I don't need one. For 7 days at least. Like, I know I'm coming home. I have 2 pair of socks. One's my dedicated like sleep sock, and one's my like a hike sock. I don't bring too much of anything for comfort. I think that's what I was telling people when I was packing on my expedition just recently, is I just kind of like compromise comfort now.
I think we have like the same exact pack setup, because I do like exactly the same thing you do. And my theory is just, it's so hard for me to keep up as is that I'm not going to weigh myself down anymore. Because like, if I can keep up with the people I want to keep up with, I need like as little weight on my back to be able to move that little bit faster.
100%. And the comfort, and like, I know people think it's
anyway.
Gross. Like, I don't need these things. Like, I know people think it's like super gross that I brought like, because I had 2 pair of underwear on the trip. One was like to switch out of the other. When I went on Knowles, I was only there for a week, so I only brought one. And like, people were just like, "You're only bringing one." I'm like, "It's only 7 days. Like, I can, kind of clean and rinse out there." So I don't bring like multiple sets of clothing. I only had like 2 pair of socks. The one thing that I did spend a lot of weight on the trail was my power bank. I had an Anker power bank. It was like 26,000 something. And I had that because I had to have my phone charged for pictures for the trail and for blogging and writing about it. And I had the Garmin. And so that was probably the heaviest thing I carried, was that power bank, to make sure I could always keep juice. But I'm telling you, like, if you backpack with me now, I don't bring a single thing anymore. Like, I get kind of grungy. I get kind of dirty.
Yeah. I think I have that same power bank. Is that the one with like the dual USB inputs so you can charge it twice as fast?
Yep.
Yeah, that thing is a cruise ship. It is heavy. That's what I brought in the PCT, because I also had a lot of electronics. But yeah, that thing is a commitment. It's always funny when your dedicated like phone electronics charger is heavier than your tent.
For real.
So, yeah. So I'm kind of backtracking a little bit to that story with those women that hike together every year and popped their head out and yelled whiskey at you. That was part of actually a very moving piece that you did about the importance of learning to accept yourself before being able to hike your own hike. Can you speak to that? And would you say that's something that happened during the hike itself, or did that happen leading up to the hike just with age and maturity?
I think a lot of that happened on the hike. I would say, like a lot of people, I'm still bound to a lot of the ideas of what I should be doing. Like I turned 38 on Sunday. I have a lot of ideas about the
Happy
things I
birthday.
should have been doing. Thanks. I'm just gonna be working.
Sorry, did you say on Sunday? On Sunday?
Yeah.
That was my birthday. Pi Day?
No, my birthday is next Sunday on the 21st.
Oh, I thought you said last Sunday. I got really excited.
No. Yeah, you're a Pisces. I'm an Aries. We get along very well. I've always been told.
Oh, that's good.
I'm just going to work. I work at a gear shop, so I'll be doing that. But I still feel like I'm bound to so many of these things that I think I should be doing. And a lot of it's doubly as hard when I'm in the outdoor industry looking like I do. I'm not like a super thin person. I'm a darker skinned Black woman. I'm a single mother. There's all these things that I think we hold on to titles and expectations of what we should be doing. I didn't graduate from college. In my head, I'm just like, I should go back, these kind of things. But all these expectations you have on yourself and what you should be doing at XYZ age or XYZ education, right, or experience. And I think the trail broke me down and taught me to just do what you can do. When I was going out there in the beginning, trying to like hit the miles everybody else was hitting and doing it at the speed everybody else was doing, or even having the gear that some people had or having more or less of that, the first few weeks, I would say, the first few weeks was a lot of me trying to reconcile the fact that I'm not as fast as maybe I would like to be. I'm not as strong as maybe I would like to be. I can't get up this incline as fast as other people. The first time when I pulled back from that storm, I was the only one that pulled back. I watched many hikers keep going, and have to be comfortable with the fact that I can still complete this trail. I can still enjoy this trail and set the rules for myself, because there really aren't any rules out there on the thru hike, and there aren't any rules on the CT. It was just get to the beginning, or start at the beginning and get to the end. And so once I got over that whole, this is how many miles you're supposed to be getting, the funny part is I started getting more miles that way, I guess. But getting comfortable with my speed and getting comfortable with myself out there. And like I was talking about the grunge and letting that go. Because in the beginning, I was just like, I smell awful. This is terrible. And towards the end, I could care less. Whatever. It is what it is.
Has that bled over into your like day-to-day life, your normal life, the way it has for me? Because I was never like the most hygienic person in the world, but definitely if I can get like, I'm only showering if I work out, and like if I don't work out in a week, sorry Jenna, I smell bad. Would you say there's any carryover from like the grunge standpoint in your day-to-day today?
Yeah, and like this is a common conversation on Twitter about how much people shower, and I always hop in with, y'all shower too much. And I'll probably get fried for saying this, but yeah, after spending an entire week out in the woods with all the grime and the dirt, and like I said, not changing your socks or underwear, and then hopping into like a bag smelling like it, and then waking up after all that funk has been marinating in the bag, and then getting out and doing it again. I am, how can I say this? I am less, it doesn't bother me as much if I miss a shower in there. It doesn't bother me as much, no.
I'll tell you a little secret. We recorded another episode on Monday. I was wearing the same shirt, and there's a reason that I'm wearing a hat right now.
I respect it. I totally respect it. Like,
no, my laundry hamper is just full of like wet clothes. Like everything that I wear is because I'm changing after a workout. I don't just like wear a thing for a day and then discard it. Like I've been wearing the same jeans for probably honestly 2 weeks, but we don't have to go there.
Okay, that's a lot. Like that's that's a little bit longer.
I think it's more like a personality disorder than a grunge thing. It's just like once I have jeans out, like I really feel like I have to like earn a new set by like spilling something on myself.
I read an article once, and I think I said this on an episode at some point, but I read an article somewhere by like the Levi's guy, which I think I said on the podcast because I think I said Levi's wrong and you made fun of me, which is why it sounds familiar. But he was saying you should only wash your jeans twice a year. And so I've just always thought, hey, at least I wash mine more than twice a year.
We set a very low bar for ourselves here.
Yeah, he said that's how you wear out your jeans. You wash them too much. Yeah, I don't know. Tell your friends.
For what it's worth, though, because I came from healthcare. I did 11 years of healthcare, like prior to getting into Black Packers. I ended as a practice manager. Like, I don't know what people's idea of what like dirty is, but just like I don't know. You don't need to shower as much as people think we do. Like, it's a very like. I get it. You want to be clean and smell a certain way and XYZ. I get that. And I don't want you to think that, you can walk around with the flies buzzing around your head and like smelling bad in public at work. That might be hard for your coworkers. But seriously, like scientifically, this bacteria on our skin is good for us. So like, I'm a fan of it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. If I didn't have such bad BO, I think I would shower even less frequently than I already do. So I'd be in a bad place. That's my body's way of saying like, dude, you got to do something. So you mentioned that you're not the fastest hiker. You don't strive to be. Can you talk a little bit about your pacing? And so you said July 6th. Sorry, I'm bad at numbers.
Yeah, July 6th to August 27th.
August 27th. Math. Okay, so about a month and a half.
7 weeks.
Yeah. So can you speak to the pacing if you were happy with that? Like somebody listening to this who wants to take on the Colorado Trail as a first through hike, can you speak to that pace and like if you could go back and do it any differently, would you?
I think I naturally would be a little bit faster just because I'm in a different set of shape than I was when I started the Colorado Trail. Like I was still just chilling in the panty, just laying in bed all day. I didn't do any training hikes. I didn't even try on my pack until literally the night before at a hotel near the Denver International Airport before I left. I did nothing to prepare. So I would think somebody who's in probably maybe better shape than I was at that point might have a better time. And I think I'd be faster in general now because I've just kicked up my activity since then because I'm like craving the adrenaline and like all the rush I got from the outdoor stuff. But the Colorado Trail is like, the average elevation is like 10,000 feet. So aside of the fact that you're constantly uphill, like always uphill, I know I went downhill at some point. I don't really remember the downhill too much, but it's like a lot of uphill into the higher elevation. So I tell somebody to just take your time, see what feels good for you. Don't worry about the people who are, blazing past you or the people who are even behind you. Just do what feels good for you. Because at the end of the day, what I remember the most about the trail wasn't the days when I was crushing miles, like the days when I finally got over my 20. That was, it was a milestone. But I remember those ladies and the whiskey. And I remember the people that helped me over Indian Trail Ridge. And I remember all the different trail names of the people who I hung out with. That's what I remember. So just enjoy it more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do like a lot of the 14er side trails while you're out there? Like, did you take advantage of how close you were to those? Because I know for a lot of people, that's something that they try to hit while they're on it.
I'm going to be honest with y'all. I was struggling so hard in the beginning. I didn't do any of those side trails. I even took Collegiate East instead of Collegiate West because I just knew myself and I love myself so much that I wasn't going to try to push it through Collegiate West, which is a lot harder. And there was one point where you're right next to like San Luis Peak. It's just like a very small little side trail that would only take you like 1,000 feet higher and you would be like over on the peak and I walk right on by it. Like there were so many different through hikers that passed me that day and they're just like, oh dude, are you going to hit the peak? And I was like, no. Like I just looked at that trail and kept going. I didn't hit any 14ers on the trip. I've done them in my private life, but I didn't do any on the Colorado trip.
Do you have a favorite moment from the Colorado Trail? And that's, I guess, a very big question. Let's narrow that down. Like a landscape vista, I guess, location on the Colorado Trail that stands out to you, or maybe a couple locations.
Oh gosh, I think when I pulled off at Cerro Pass, that was a huge one. When I downloaded the Taylor Swift album, I found a amazing alcove of trees that was like so close to timberline, but I had these super tall trees and it was just perfect for my tent. So it almost became like a house or a home. I love that place a lot. I cannot think of exactly where I was, but it was as I was getting to Silverton, I had a rough day and I ended up like climbing to the top of this peak. And I got to the top of this peak, I realized there was nobody around for miles because you could see, pretty far out there. And like I was kind of sad because I was lonely that day. I wanted to be around people that day, and I wasn't around people that day. And I pitched my tent like around 12,000 something feet, and it was one of the most gorgeous places. I have pictures of it on my Instagram, but just being able to see for so far, gosh, it was gorgeous. So those two places are probably my favorite locations, I think, in terms of like places I went to on the trail.
And I'm trying to, there's other subjects I want to get to. I'm just trying to think, are there any other notable highlights from the Colorado Trail that we should hit on before we get to some of this other stuff?
I mean, I think that's about it. Whenever I tell people about the Colorado Trail, I just talk about how because people are just always like, oh, you must be, badass because you hike the Colorado Trail. And I'm like, I just walked. And I walked slowly at that. Like, it wasn't even something there were like two different people who were setting records for running the Colorado Trail at the same time. We were all on there. They literally ran past us at times. So I just tell people that it's not, I don't know what people think of through hikers, especially people who aren't as familiar with the outdoors. Because when I say I walked 486 miles, they're just like, oh my, like, are you out of your mind? Or like my grandma, who was convinced I was going to get eaten alive, like every single night. She was convinced I was going to die. I just tell people like anybody can do it. Certainly if I can. And it's, like I said, super life-changing, something I'm committed to still doing. And a lot of the education I've been doing, like with the Knowles course or me taking my woofer, is to help guide people on longer backpacking trips this summer with backpackers to hopefully give them a little bit of that experience of what it's like to like be self-sustaining for 7 days and smell awful for 7 days and just like walk for 7 days and only depend on what's on your back. I think it's life-changing for people.
So you mentioned oh, sorry, go ahead, Jones.
Go on.
I'm going to just go in the other room, so I'm getting out of your way.
I was going to ask how many. That was funny. I was going to ask how many. So I know you keep mentioning taking people out on trips. How many trips do you usually take in a year, and how many people do you think you've brought outside?
That's an interesting question because like we've only been operating as a nonprofit for that long. I could talk about the different numbers on the trips. Prior to COVID, I tried to do 2 events per month. And then with COVID, it slowed down to about an event per month. And in between there, I'll do like some casual hiking or I'll do some private guiding of families. I like to do that as well. So maybe families who can't make it out to a group event, I'll just take somebody or some people who have never went on my own. So prior to COVID, it was about 2 events per month. After it's been 1. Like I said, at Arapahoe Basin, we took, 27 people. 47 were at Camp Shady Brook. It was 32 at 11 Mile. There was a lot of people when we went fly fishing at the Platte River, and I can't remember that exact number. But typically it's in the higher 20s to 30s per event, depending on what it is. Sometimes when I do the smaller camping trips, I tap out about 9, especially if I know it's going to be in an area where the terrain's kind of tough. But for like our bigger events that have partners, we get into like the 30s.
I'm curious, how does the exposure of your hike interface with backpackers from the standpoint, like, do you ever encounter people that weren't aware of either the Colorado Trail or like the concept of through hiking, and then they stumbled upon whether it was a backpacker post, or I know you did a really good post or a really good interview with CPR. I'm curious, like, were you able to bring the concept of backpacking to people that would otherwise not be familiar with it through those venues?
For sure. And I think actually one of my most successful ways of reaching people who didn't have the experience with outdoors, because, with backpackers, a lot of people that do outdoors, and CPR's audience is very specific as well. I tweeted so much during that trip. And I think that was where I got the most exposure for people who didn't have as much familiarity with through hiking in general. And so I was able to capture the attention of people who may have never even thought about doing it, let alone a Black woman doing it. And I just really enjoyed interacting with people in that way, because I'd like post something about like pooping outdoors, or I'd post something about I bought a pee funnel because I'm tired of squatting. I want to pee standing up. And then there's somebody who followed me and just like, what do you mean pee standing up? Or what do you mean squat? Blah, blah, blah. And then I explained what I did. And so that was probably my best outreach was on Twitter. People asking questions just like, well, how do you poop outdoors? I'm like, well, let's talk about pooping outdoors. And so I did it a lot during the trip. When I had service and I had the time, I just sit down and like tweet pictures of what I was doing and talk about it. And people ask questions. And I think it definitely, at least in Twitter, was good outreach for people.
Yeah. as of like maybe a few minutes before the show, we are now Twitter friends, but I would like to give a very honest endorsement of your Twitter feed. Very entertaining. One thing I've learned, I don't know if this is just like a recency biased or maybe this is part of an affinity that you have, but are you a big Breaking Bad fan?
Oh, yeah, I'm a huge break. I've been rewatching it for like the ninth time right now. You saw me tweet about Hank. Hank deserved better. I
Yeah.
truly believe Hank deserved better.
It's funny because early on in that show, Hank is the square. Like, you kind of don't like Hank. That's the thing I love about the show is like you love and hate everybody in that show. And like Hank is, I think you put it very well. He ends up being like the unsung hero of the show. My question is, which character do you think would be best suited for a thru hike?
Oh my gosh, on Breaking Bad? Wow, that's a good question. Which person? Huh. I don't know about you talking about somebody to hike with me or just somebody you think that would be good at thru hiking?
Yeah, I guess both. Let's go both.
Huh, the person you best at thru hiking. See, okay, so maybe I'm like probably I like Hank a lot, and I think he's pretty tough. So I think Hank will be a good at thru hiking. I wouldn't want to hike with him though, because I feel like me and Hank would have nothing to talk about, nothing in common. I would really like to hike with Gus. I'm not sure how anybody else would feel about that, but Gus was like, he was amazing to me. He was just like super clever and I think low key funny in a way that would be interesting on the thru hike. Also, I know we'd get to the end with Gus. Gus isn't a quitter. Would he murder me on the thru hike? I'm not sure. But if he didn't, I know we'd get to the end of the thru hike. So
he's another one of those characters that you go, it's more of a hate love cycle with him. Cause like they portray him as like the ultimate villain. And then by the end of it, you have to question like, wait, is he actually the bad guy here? Yeah, I think Gus would be a good one.
I hate that Walt killed him. I feel like that was just so whack for somebody as amazing as Gus to get taken out by Walt. Like, that's a whole long story, but he deserved more too.
Yeah, totally. I feel you could probably fill in that sentence with a lot of characters in Breaking Bad. Spoiler alert. If you haven't watched it, the show is what, like 10 years old at this point? So how about the person that you said you like to hike mostly with Gus. Okay. I like those answers.
Yeah, for sure.
So I do want to talk a little bit more about blackpackers. We did kind of go out of order from the way I wanted to approach the conversation. And I'm sure you've encountered this a lot. And I apologize for even bringing it up, but there's got to be at least like one probably pretty ignorant person or stance that thinks that like, what is the race boundary that prevents someone of color from getting on the trail? Like I see this comment on Facebook all the time. Like last I checked, they're not checking IDs to get out onto the trail. So can you kind of speak to that mentality?
I hear it a lot. Oh gosh, I'll get a lot. You'll see if you follow me long enough, you'll see this. I'll talk about blackpackers and somebody will tweet, that's racist that it's called blackpackers, or what if we called it white packers? I'm like, well, that's first off, that's everybody else, but also weird. That's not even a clever name. At least mine's clever. But then you get like people who do the same thing you say. I was recently in this Indie Give campaign, which is a huge nonprofit campaign in Colorado Springs, where all the nonprofits campaign for money over the season. November, December. And I had to do a TV spot with a local news channel to talk about blackpackers and what our mission was. And it was actually a really clever insult. Somebody tweeted me after that and said, poor people can hike just fine without nonprofit Nancy butting in. And I actually thought it was a really clever way to dig at me. But the point is, people don't understand that these things do cost money. People say, like, it's free to go run. It's free to go hike. It really isn't. You can access it for sure, and like these things can happen. But when you look at it, do you have shoes that will make it enjoyable or make it successful? Do you have the clothing that would make it successful? The knowledge, the maps, all the things that come with hiking and backpacking and camping that people think are free aren't really as free as they think. Even me, myself, when I first started getting into hiking, you can go out there with whatever shoes you want, but how are you going to come back? Are you going to enjoy it? And the outdoors should be enjoyable if you want to continue doing it. So I think that people kind of they're short-sighted in the fact that technically, yes, it's free to go hike in Garden of the Gods Park, However, do you have the skill necessary to hike through it? Do you have the gear to do it? Even the shoes to do it? The knowledge behind how to hike or how to successfully hike? These are things I think people take for granted when they talk about free. And it took me literally Googling and getting it wrong for a year or so before I started getting the skills without any training to do it. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to do, is to, one, make sure people don't have to go through learning the hard way, but then two, provide the resources. I think a lot of times in this country, we don't like to talk about the economic inequities in this country, especially how that affects Black people. Because I think when you say things like reparations, that immediately triggers a certain kind of people. But the point is, when it comes to wealth and the numbers and statistics, it's harder for some people than others, period. When we talk about living wage versus a sustainable wage, like, I think what we make now, especially the minimum wage or how wages are, all it is a living wage. All you do is pay the bills. All it is a sustainable wage. I'm sorry. It just sustains your bills, sustains your ability to buy food, pay your car payment. But a living wage means you can also do that and then pay to go do outdoor recreation. Can we do that in this country? Are we providing people with that kind of wage and those resources? I don't think we are. So that's kind of like what I try to counter with people when they talk about that. But I don't think there's a certain group of people I'm never going to get to when I tell them that hiking isn't as free as you think it is, or the outdoors isn't as free as you'd like to think it is.
Yeah. And how about just the act of building Blackpackers? Like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you are facing in terms of getting the message out and just growing the nonprofit?
Honestly, I'm the only person that works with Blackpackers. So I think the hardest part has been keeping up with demand. Actually, we've had such a great response. The community, especially in Colorado Springs, has been so welcoming and so open to us. I'm just at the moment the only employee. However, we did just receive a grant that I could pay for an intern, so soon I will have help. But there's just so many people that to want to go outdoors, and I want them to experience that. I wish there was like 4 of me, so I could make sure I could get as many people as possible. I just think, honestly, I don't have enough time to hit everybody as much as I would like to, but we're trying to.
Mm-hmm. Perfect opportunity. Somebody that wants to help the organization that doesn't live locally. Where should they go? What should they do?
They can always donate to Blackpackers at coblackpackers.com. It's a nonprofit. We always need money. Excuse me. We also need volunteers. On the Arapahoe Basin trip, one of my partners, partners in the business, that is, not partners personally, I knew them from Camp Shady Brook, and he came out to help with the ski trip just because he already had a pass to A-Bay and he knew how to ski and snowboard. He wanted to help out. So volunteers are always necessary. I also had somebody donate literally the cost of the tuition for the Knowles trip I just went on for me to get out. That was, stranger, I wouldn't say a stranger now, but a stranger on Twitter donated the money specifically and paid my tuition to go on that Knowles course. And so things like that, the outreach people have been giving, the partnerships, donating gear, has all been contributing to, making Blackpackers, a business that can be accessible to everybody and get the outdoors accessible to everybody.
Shout out to that person. The little bit that I've dipped my toe into those Knowles courses, they're not cheap. Yeah. So, and I know you've mentioned this a handful of times. Can you speak a little bit more about the specific Knowles course?
Yeah, we would. So Southwest Leaders of Color. It is a course for affinity groups. In this case, BIPOC. We were in the Southwest version of Knowles, which is in Tucson, Arizona, and we spent 9 days in the Galliero Mountains out of Arizona. That was tough. That was actually at times tougher than the CT because Knowles doesn't really do the lightweight thing. They don't really do the lightweight gear. And it was also an expedition pack as opposed to the pack I was carrying. So I was carrying more weight on my back than I've ever carried. It was like my base weight was 38 pounds. That is a number unheard of for someone like me whose base weight was around like 12 on the CT. So my base weight was like 38 pounds. I had like 12 pounds of rations. We had to carry drums at times that were 6 liters, and each liter of water is 2.2 pounds. So, like, it was super heavy, and everybody on the trip was divided as BIPOC, and it was 3 women of color who led the trip. It was amazing.
That's awesome. And so, does that inform the sorts of courses that you'll be doing? Because like I would imagine you're qualified to lead a backpacking course just based on your Colorado Trail experience alone. Did you need the NOLS course in order to, like, I don't know, is there like a certification that makes it like covers insurance aspects or permitting or anything like that?
It's always good to have more experience for insurance, especially running a business. That's why I'm getting the woofer. But I now know how to the backcountry bidet. I'm not sure who I would teach that to, but I learned how to literally wipe my butt with my hand and wash my hands out there. That was a lot. I didn't really do it, actually. I ended up trying to do the way they taught me and deciding to use one of the socks on my feet instead because I wasn't ready to wipe my butt with my hand. That's just not my jam right now. But I know how to do it. I learned even a better bear hang, some knots that I didn't know beforehand. I think I learned a lot more technical skills that just me stumbling on the Colorado Trail and learning things the hard way as I went along didn't really cover. So they taught me a lot of stuff that I didn't know, and I'm super stoked to show to other people.
Got it.
I think that's good too, especially since you are bringing people out for the first time and teaching them. Is like, I mean, like you can definitely get the skills you need to do a trip from something like hiking the Colorado Trail, but having the knowledge of how to teach something the right way because you're watching someone else teach you it the right way is going to make sure that you can teach the people that you're bringing out the right way, and then it just trickles down from there.
For sure, that's huge. The trip was made for people who are outdoor leaders or guides already, or want to become guides, like the leaders, the color part. And so they taught us in a manner to work on our leadership skills. And so that was huge too. And they gave us a lot of opportunities to be leaders. And I think that the 3 women that took us on that trip, I will be learning from them for the rest of my life. They were absolutely peerless and how they taught us and how they led us. And I'm hoping that I can carry on a little bit what they taught me out there into my own group. They just managed to not only just keep us physically safe, but keep us emotionally and mentally safe. And I think that's something you don't always see in a lot of environments, especially when it's not like it was all people of color. And I think there's a language we speak to each other and an understanding we have that sometimes doesn't translate to like the bro culture you'll get. And I see it a lot in Colorado. Like you'll see people who go through something tough or life-threatening. They're just like, hell yeah, dude, like we survived, yeah. And then there's other people that want to process and talk about that. And I think it's an awesome manner of looking at both sides of that story. Like, yeah, some people totally dig the adrenaline, and that's cool too, whatever. But there's also another way of leading in the outdoors that doesn't have to be constantly like proving that you can survive by harming yourself or potentially harming yourself or putting yourself through a whole bunch of pain. And I think that Knowles and those ladies did a really good job of, showing us that we can still be leaders and we don't have to prove ourselves to anybody.
Yeah, I think Chance and I are probably more, excuse me, on the risk averse end of the spectrum. At least I know I'm trending in that direction.
You're more risky than I am. I'm not as risky as you are.
No, that's true, but a lot of that is the company that I keep. But I won't deny that. That is true. Okay, I think the last question I've got for you here. I know we're up against.
I know I talk a lot about like bodily functions and smells. That's kind of like because I could talk about